Hey, it's Clayton
And Ed.
from howtodrawcomics.net, and today we're here to tell you about
The Summer Slam. Okay,
2022.
that's right. This is our 10th annual Summer Slam. No, it's like our fourth or fifth or something like that, right?
Something
And
like that.
something like that, yeah. So what is the Summer Slam? Well, what it is, years ago, we started this challenge in our Facebook group and with our students, trying to get them to draw sequential pages because that's tough, right? Like everybody that wants to be a comic book artist loves to do covers and pinups and all that. And that's a great part of the industry, but that's not the majority of the industry. The majority is being able to tell a story. So in our How to Draw Comics group on Facebook and with Clayton and I students and everything, we started this challenge, getting small little scripts, just 1 page or 2 page scripts, and putting it out there and seeing what people would come with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. And we got to give credit where credit's due because we had a lot of help
Oh,
with
totally.
this year's SummerSlam.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that like the guys at Comic Cast, Joe and Gerald, they really threw down for us both in helping to judge and sponsoring this contest because we've got lots of
Mm.
giveaways that we have, right? And then for judging, who else did we have?
Oh, we had Rick, we had Victor. Well, I should say their full names, right? Rick Bulow and Victor. What was his last name again?
Rufino.
Rufino, that's right.
How
We
can we
had,
forget?
I mean, I'm terrible with names and
Oh, so am I.
remembering them.
We also
Who
had
else did
Death
we have?
Pemison,
Death Pemison, of course. We love
right?
Death.
And Mike Van Orden, one of our instructors as well.
Hmm. Yeah, are
Yeah,
we
really
missing
like
anybody there?
I hope not. If we do, we'll come back to it. I feel bad, but what I really want to get into is why we're doing this right now, right?
Hmm.
So what we've got in front of us, we're going to share a screen here with you, and we're going to go over all the entries. So this is a 2 page script written by Joe Tolliver from Comics Cast, right? And it's kind of like a little bit of riff off of Thor: Love and Thunder, but with a diner thrown into it, right? So you can look
Hmm.
at this script on our How to Draw Comics Facebook group, right? You can just
Yep.
join up there, and you're welcome to draw at any time. Like just because we've got previous year's scripts and the contests are already done, throw down, draw the script, and just flex a little bit, test your muscles, test your panelistic muscles and
Hmm.
stuff, right? And see if you can compare yourself to maybe some of the entries. What we're doing today is the judging's already done. We've already done the judging, and we're not going to talk about who won or who lost or anything like that. What we're going to do is look at each entry for what it is. We're going to look at that artist level and give them some feedback. And listen, like sometimes this feedback can seem a little harsh. So I want you to think right away everyone did a great job. Everyone that
Hmm.
submitted, we love you. You're awesome. You really like if you submitted and you completed 2 pages, you've already won, right? So put that aside. I want you to kind of put the fact that we already like you. We've already got compliments heading your way and all that kind of stuff. And I want you to take the feedback that we're going to get and give to you and just grow with it a little bit because really that's why a lot of people join this is to get this feedback. So unfortunately, all of us judges actually recorded a session on feedback and we had some technical problems. So Clayton and I are back and making sure that we key on what was already said in some of those
Hmm.
panels and just our opinions as well. Sound good, Clayton?
Absolutely. So, do
Okay,
you want to
so
go first or should I? Look, you're
um,
leading the show. I think you
oh,
should go first.
okay, I'll go first. First entry, page one here is by Tom Cuthbert. And
Hmm.
the first thing I always do whenever I'm looking at a page, I'm looking at panel flow. I'm looking to say, okay, does this move the way I want it to? Does this move my eye the way I want it to? And so we've got a conversation here. And I like this conversation. It's kind of focused here and brings me over to Hercules, who kind of points me down in this direction. Brings me to here, to this panel. She kind of points me over here. I like that. Another conversation. And the angle of this panel points me down to here. There's a conversation happening here. And this points me, both this angle and this face points me back down to this panel. I've got this direction is pointing me to the last one and it's nice and centered, right? So basically, we've got a beautiful zigzag pattern in this page layout, right? And after
Yeah.
drawing all this, I realized I drew on the actual sheet, so I'm going to kind of back it out.
Great
Um,
readability, though. I
it is.
totally agree with that.
It's really really good. And I'm going to drop down to page number 2 then, and just kind of take a quick look at it here. We've got this P1 up here, panel 1, and it's a nice explosion. Everything's going pretty good. It's pretty simple. There's some debris and stuff, right? It's interesting though. Sorry, I'm just going to go with readability right now. Brings us down to this panel 2, and we've got a nice ring of bad guys
Hmm.
with the good guys in the middle. We can see the bad guys, Blastar, and I forget her name. Do you remember?
I don't know. I am even worse at Marvel lore than you are,
Yeah,
Ed.
yeah, I know, and I can't. I'm
The
failing here,
bad
right?
guy.
But the composition here is really good. It kind of rings the focus here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the first page then and kind of talk about it. Just a quick overview here. Like I said, the readability is great. I think looking at the consistency and style is great. I like the camera pan here. The top down bird's eye view down here, right? The zoom in. We've got a bit of a zoom in, especially. I don't always love faces being cropped, but this works really well here. Then we back the camera out a little bit. And then another big zoom here with a bit of a goofy expression, right? Come to the next
Yes.
page. And again, I'm really liking how everything looks here. I got to say, like, I love this entry. This is one of my favorite entries. I'm only going to pick kind of one panel here. I think this explosion in the middle of a road, and this is a wide road. Like, if I'm really looking at it, I'm kind of confused of where this Waffle House would be. Is the Waffle House blowing up? Was it in front of it? There's no real signs of what blew up here. Like, it's just a random explosion in the middle of a massive boulevard here. And so I don't know. I think as we see later on, some entries do this a little bit better. So I think if I'm going to pick anything apart here, and there's a lot of great things here, Tom, I'm going to say rework this panel. Listen to some of the advice we give for later entries, and you'll be like, yep, I see it, and I know what to do. And you'll attack that panel.
Big
Clayton,
time.
sound
Yeah,
good? Anything you want to add to that, or it sound pretty good?
just a small note because you pretty much covered everything here. Totally agree. You need visual cues to tell the audience what it is they're looking at. You need to leave clues because they can't tell. But they don't. But
Right.
the piece of advice I want to give you is you did such a great job on the previous page of mixing up your camera angles and adding that variation, which people love. It keeps them engaged, keeps them hooked. On this page, however, the page 2 that we were looking at, we've got a shot with a 1-point perspective where we see the explosion, and then the one below that, although it's a little bit more zoomed in, so we get the variation there, it's still a 1-point perspective shot.
Yeah.
And so what I would have done here, and you've got a bunch of different options that you can choose from, but the thing I would have done is I would have messed with the camera angle even more in either panel 1 or panel 2 just to give that difference between the two, help to keep that engagement happening.
Good call, man.
You know what? It depends on the context of the storytelling too. Sometimes you're going to want a situation like this where you've got the same camera angle and a little bit of a zoom variation for all the shots, but just take
Could
it
be.
for
But
what
I
it is.
think it's worth noting on that, right? Okay, number 2, we'll go with Orlando Baez.
Hey, Orlando Baez.
Yeah, what do you think of page number 1 here?
Yeah, let's take a look at the storytelling here. We've got the initial establishing shot. Now you can see that we've got a very even, very neat looking grid for the page overall. That's a very old style of comic book storytelling, which keeps things organized, makes it look neat and tidy. So good job there, first off. There's a little bit of variation in the gutter spacing, so you just want to make sure that in the vertical gutters, you've got the same amount of distance as in the horizontal gutters. All the gutters should be the same, just to keep that order in place. And let's talk about technical drawing ability for a moment, specifically in terms of the fundamentals. And, I think that overall, you've got a little bit of work to do on your anatomy when it comes to the characters. I'm looking at the muscles on, the big buff dude, Hercules, and Thor in particular. in
Hmm.
panel one, and you've got an idea of what's going on. You've got a feeling for it, but it's not
Hmm.
100% accurate or evident to me that these muscle groups are in their correct places, scaled to the correct size in comparison to one another. So,
Yeah.
what I would suggest there, look, you don't need to know anatomy off by heart when it comes to drawing comic books, but you do need to have some reference material there just to cross check what you're drawing down onto the page and what's true to reality, and to make sure that people get what it is you're trying to portray on the page.
Hmm.
So there's that. That's just a quick little tip. In terms of your proportions, I think that they're pretty good to go. You've done a great job on the posing for the most part, but here in this final row of panels in the far left, uh, there's a little bit of an odd foreshortening issue. I can see what you were going for there, but
Hmm.
I think that it's either the size of the arm, the length of the arm, or the positioning of the arm in conjunction with the angle of the camera that's sort of making the whole panel look a little bit off. It's all about tweaking when it comes to a shot like this. Foreshortening, there's no go-to rule necessarily. You've got to really trust your eye when it comes to making sure this stuff looks good. And so, sometimes you've just got to take a break, take a step back,
Hmm.
come back to it later and see whether or not there's changes that need to be made. And here, to me, it just looks like the hand's just a little bit too big, maybe even the whole lower arm itself. And so maybe it would have been a good idea to shrink that down just as a small modification in order to rectify that. But
Maybe, using cylinders or something like that, right? Like to see how these
yeah, for
cylinders
sure.
might might come back or something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
it depends. Like
And, yeah, use the cylinders. That's a great idea, and that's
Mhm.
oftentimes what I do. The other trick that you can use is by placing the joints onto the page first before you
Mhm.
draw the lines in between them. So figure
That's
out,
right.
okay, where do you want the hand? Do
Yeah.
you want it here? Do you want it here? Right,
Hmm.
coming out
Yeah.
at them, and
Yeah.
then work your way back to the shoulder. So
Yeah.
work your way back from the hand to the elbow to the shoulder, and then you're done. Don't beat yourself up over foreshortening, though. Everybody has a hard time with it, me and Ed included.
Totally. And you can use yourself as a bit of a guide to say, okay, this is the size of my fist, and this is the
Hmm.
size of my deltoid. And so I can compare that they're kind of similar, and I can kind of maybe say that the elbow has a similar thickness to it or something like that, right? So if
Yeah.
I'm using that and I've got three similar size joints, right? So orbs, whatever I want to use them. Well, this one is, if you're going for that foreshortening, it's going to be that much bigger close to the camera. This is going to be the middle spot, the elbow, and then the shoulder is going to be smaller, right? Like, so make sure you push that. And then the relationship then with the head and the face, all those kind of things. I think
Hmm.
proportions, keeping proportions in line with that foreshortening that's the name of
Hmm.
the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, good job on the shape, the use of shape when it comes to Thor in that bottom last panel. You
Mhm.
have got the anatomy fairly well sorted there. So work on your anatomy in some areas, but in other panels you've got it all worked out. And then that shape is so important. That's what gives it that immediate readability to the
Yep.
audience.
Page number 2 here.
Okay, page number two. Yeah, again,
Mhm.
this is a 1 point perspective shot in the top panel. This is a
Mhm.
giant explosion. Remember that. It's
Mhm.
chaos. It's crazy, right? There's stuff flying everywhere. Everything that was peaceful and blissful in the
Mhm.
beginning, it's now absolutely destroyed. And so what kind of camera angle could we pick for something like that? Is a 1 point perspective really appropriate for a situation such as this? I would say no. If 1 point perspective is quite organized, very symmetrical, this isn't that situation. This is chaos. And so I would pull the camera back, maybe look at it from the top, maybe from below. A dramatic low shot can
Mhm.
really, enhance the feeling and the mood, the emotion of the moment. And here's the other thing. We do have an indication that this is the diner that they were at, but we
Yeah.
don't know it's necessarily the waffle place. So add a giant waffle, I don't know,
Waffle.
I think so.
like
Yeah, a giant
signage or something
waffle.
like that. Yeah.
Add a giant waffle sign, something that tells me, the viewer, that this is the waffle place the heroes were just at that's exploding,
Hmm.
and it'll give it a greater sense of place and cohesiveness in terms of the storytelling. Let's drop down to the bottom panel there, Ed.
Sure.
And I think this shot works well. One thing that I would say with this particular panel is the biggest challenge here that you're facing is shining the spotlight on both the heroes and the villains at the same time. You've got a choice to make. It's hard to do both.
Hmm.
But how can we make it so that even if the heroes are in the front, that they are able to be more visible, and or vice versa,
Hmm.
right? Is that you can move the two closer together. Now we already know what the heroes look like. Okay, we know
Right.
them, so we can view them from the back in this shot. In my opinion, it's
Hmm.
okay. We don't need to see them the full frontal. So what you can do instead is swap it around. Have the villains there. This is their entrance, right? And then bring them forward so that they're close and so that they can take up more space in that bottom panel, more impactful. That's how it should be on a final punchline panel such as this.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the villain reveal, right? Quick little note. You can see this. The camera angle, I believe, is kind of somewhat looking down at our heroes. It's consistent with we see this footing, but not this one,
Mm,
right? Like we're looking down. I feel like the camera angles, or our camera is sitting somewhere around here
absolutely,
and
yeah.
looking slightly down, right? So then we've got
Yep.
to be consistent in that in all the footing and all the stances and all that kind of stuff, right?
Big time. Big
Okay,
time.
next up
Good
is
point.
Nicholas Klein. I'll take this one.
Hmm.
Um, I think that looking at it right now, he spent some time constructing the booth and everything, and I like that. Oh, sorry, no, I'm going to do my flow first. So I've got
Mm,
this flow brings me nowhere. This flow brings me straight at the viewer. This flow brings me over here and stops dead. This flow doesn't really bring me anywhere. Over here, it and you know what I mean? I've got nothing that's telling me to go from one panel to the next to the next. I should be going like this, right? But there's
hmm
nothing other than this panel choice of a overlapping panel that's telling me automatically. So the way we read in Western comics is forcing me along this way, and that's fine. That's kind of the last thing to rely on, but that works. But there's nothing drawn here that leads the viewer's eye. You'll see it more and more where artists choose to push and pull and move the viewer a little bit, but Nicholas didn't. Okay,
hmm
page number 2. Let's see. I'm going to back it out. I like that we've got a directional beam here heading into the explosion. I can see the Waffle House. It's the Waffle House that's blowing. A little bit more set dressing around. Like I like this car here. That's a good choice, but a little bit more than just one car, right? Like I do like this lineup, but I might have kind of tilted it a little bit so that they're actually more looking slightly down this way instead of bringing my eye back this way. Like if I had 2 pages sitting here and they're pushing me this way, I'm tempted to wonder what did I miss on that last page, right?
And this is all
Uh,
subconscious what Ed's talking about, by the way.
right. Yeah,
So
this
this
is
is
stuff
about
that you
guiding the viewer.
absolutely you want. You are the director of this show, right? You're the manipulator. You're the one who wants to manage and manipulate the viewer's direction, right? And that's what this is doing. This last panel, I kind of dig it, even though the main reveals are really small. I can barely make them out. You know what I mean? Like they don't pop off the screen. Who pops off the screen is these trolls jumping and everything, right? Um, I think what they're doing a little bit here is a bit of forced perspective, working on
Hmm
like you could see how kind of pushed these lower bodies are compared to the
Yeah.
upper bodies, right? And so this is a bit of a lensing that they're using, which is a really advanced technique. I think it's really cool. When
Tough
you
to
take
pull
a
off.
picture, what's that?
It's tough to pull off for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think they're kind of pulling it off here. But then my question is, why? Why am I like showing and emphasizing these boots? right? Like I don't know. It's the emphasis. I guess the last panel here, the emphasis is should be the reveal and the face off and stuff, right? And the
Mm.
reveal isn't really doing it. The capes are kind of cool, and I like the stances, but I don't know. I think the reveal is really missing out here. Let's see. Anything else I wanted to say from this first one? There was something that was jumping out at me. Oh, sorry. Just one small anatomy point. I think he broke his wrist with that that point. You know what I mean? Like, watch, hands just really can't snap on that angle and
Mm-hmm.
that far and stuff like that. Like, you're really pushing the
Mm.
believability there of a
Which panel's
reasonable
that?
anatomy. That was P1
P1. Yep. Oh, yeah.
on page one.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's not a big thing. It's just little things like that throw the viewer a little bit and might catch an eye for too much. Like, just like
Mm.
this is not really. It looks like it's sinking into the cushion here, but this isn't really a cushion; it's a plastic thing, right? Like, he's trying, but
Mm.
there's some things that are just kind of throwing the eye a little bit, right?
And that comes down to, because I can see what you were trying to do there. You wanted to rotate the axe, or the hammer. What's his weapon of
It's kind of
choice?
like a golden mallet thing.
It's like a club or something.
Yeah, golden mallet club.
And I can see you wanted to make it look organic and natural, so you rotated it a little bit. But here's the
Mhm.
thing, you've got to look into how do you do that with the proper perspective. There's a defined perspective already. It's a 1 point perspective in that first panel. Now you want to rotate an item. So how do you do that correctly? How do you do it accurately?
You know,
Right?
one
You've
thing that
got to draw vanishing points up to that
might
horizon
have
line.
worked is if it's leaning, just come in with let's see, come in with a bit of a shadow underneath it,
Yeah.
and there we go.
That's a neat little trick, Ed.
Right, that I think right there probably would just it would again create that believability, right? Like, obviously I didn't do the shadow 100% there, but like it makes sense that it's just leaning, and so it's casting a little bit of a shadow and everything, and like, and that's the
Mhm.
next thing. Like, now that I'm gonna go on that, where's the shadow under these characters, right? He's shading the characters, but where's the drop shadow of them sitting on things, right? Like, you can't see it all the time, but he spent time shading the characters, and there's this general stuff thrown around, but there's drop
Mm.
shadows from all of this stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And they can add a lot of depth.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential for tightening it up and working a little bit there. You're up next with Mike Johnson.
All right, Mike Johnson. Nice work on this page, my friend. This is looking pretty good. Look, there's some anatomy, attention to anatomy that might be required here on your behalf.
Mhm.
Again, you don't need to be a perfect, like, surgeon level anatomy expert. You just need to use some reference material. When you're looking at that reference material, observe where the muscle groups are and also the outside shape of the
Mhm.
body part that you're drawing. Okay, now I'm primarily looking at this guy's arms, right? Hercules' arms to the far right of the first panel.
Yeah.
You know, it's looking a little bit malformed, and don't take offense to that at all. It just requires a little bit of tweaking. You know, sometimes the arms that I draw for my characters, any part of their body, can look a little bit malformed. So I sit there and I tweak it. You don't always have to settle on the first line that you laid down onto the page. You can mess around with that thing for as long as you need to get it right. Now let's just take a look at this first establishing shot. It's actually pretty good. I like that you're giving a sense of place. You've got the exterior buildings that we can see out the window, giving the feeling that there's a bigger world here that we're being pulled into by the story,
Mhm.
by what you're showing us, which is a great little trick. It's fantastic. And you can see that these characters, they're having a wonderful conversation. They're laughing, they're happy. It's good to see that emotion coming across, setting the stage, the context of the event that's unfolding in emotional terms. That's what you want in order to have people relate to what it is they're looking at.
Totally.
And and I can see that you've done your best with the posing. That's good. Obviously, practice makes perfect with that. Do a few more gestures. That'll help
Mhm.
you out. In terms of readability, because this is sequential storytelling, I'm trying to figure out, where is my eye supposed to be led? This is something that Ed picks up on all the time. And what we're really trying to do here is guide the viewer from one panel to the other subliminally with
Mhm.
your artwork. Okay, and that's not entirely happening here. Maybe the guy's arm in the first panel, Hercules' arm is guiding us into panel two, but then, we get to panel two and, Hercules is pointing in the opposite direction, could be pointing toward the previous page for all we know. And so
Mhm.
even though we naturally have this instinct to read from left to right, it can help just with the flow of the page to have your images within the panel suggesting what panel they need to go to next in order to continue the story. All right, so let's scroll down the page a little bit more here, Ed. I think that you've done a pretty good job composing your panels. You've left space for the speech bubbles, for the
Mhm.
dialogue. That's
Mhm.
always an important consideration. You want that there. I can see especially you've done that in the far left panel or the bottom row. And, you got some close-up shots. You got a great amount of variation. You're pulling the camera back and forth, one panel after the other. You're mixing up your viewpoints, which is good. It's not just the one, point perspective that we're seeing all the time.
Mhm.
Let's go to the next page, Ed.
Sure.
Okay, great. Great top panel there. I think that's wonderful. You've got the sign there saying the Waffle House. Great. We know it's the Waffle House that they're in. Wonderful visual cue. I'd add a few more details surrounding it. Maybe some traffic lights, maybe a few more cars in the parking lot. Maybe some even just trash cans. Really like small details can add to the believability of the scene that you're setting for the viewer.
Just so you know, the term that we usually use in the industry is called set dressing.
There you go.
Yep, you want to dress the set, right? You're setting the scene and you want to have realistic things about it.
Fantastic explosion there. I think that is great. Wonderful work. And then we've got the heroes emerging. Good looking hero shot. As for
Mhm.
the villain shot, it's dwindling. It's not impactful at all. I can barely see the villains whatsoever. And so rather than splitting this section into two panels, keep it one panel and focus on the villains because this is their entrance. We've been introduced to the characters already. We saw them in the diner chatting up a storm with one another, arm wrestling and whatnot. We don't really need to show them again, right? We
Mhm.
don't need to introduce them to the viewer. We need to introduce those villains. And so what I'd suggest doing is pull the camera into them. Heck, if you're going to split it into two panels, shrink down that panel, have a close-up of the heroes' faces all looking at something like they've turned around, and you don't even have to try and fit the villains into the same scene at that point. You just show their
Mhm.
faces, right? You squeeze that panel down so that it's really, really, very little height, very shallow, and then
Yep.
boom, you blow up that last panel. Just show the villains, give them the glory.
I'm going to say this in Mike's defense. I believe that there was two different versions of the script. One
Oh,
version that
right.
called for two panels on the last page, and another version that called for three. So I
I
think he's
see.
trying to fight the three. But as you just said, this could be a tighter cropped panel,
Hmm.
and then this could be taking up much more real estate. Right? We've got a lot of
Hmm.
potential there. Right?
The great
Um,
thing is about the tighter crop, by the way, you can zoom right into those faces, zoom right out to view the villains in that bottom panel. Great variation,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Right.
always what you want. You want that contrast
Yeah.
with everything, value, camera angles, etc.
Just a little note that I want to do on page one. Yeah, we're talking about Hercules and stuff. Hercules, if we look at the character reference, Hercules is huge. He's actually a bigger guy than Thor. So his shoulders would be this big. His back would be coming down here. This is how big Hercules would be sitting in this seat or something. So
Mm.
that would carry over into this panel. He'd be a much bigger guy sitting here. Okay. The
Mm.
next thing that I would say that I really liked is see, we're talking about that drop shadow. And so he took the time to shade the characters and the time to drop a shadow under. Here's something weird though, and I'm trying to figure this out. I'll switch colors here just so I can kind of show it. Here's the table, right? But then the table looks like it comes right here. But then her legs would be on the table. This is how the table would be. But
Mm.
her leg is overlapping the table. It makes no sense.
Mm.
The artist flubbed
Mm-hmm.
here. There's something going on there, right? The other thing is, watch out. This tangent bothers me. It looks like the hair, right? So, and just with the colors being so similar and stuff like that, this is not a great tangent. But yeah, something happened with this table here.
Now, I didn't know what tangents were for a long time. So, do you want
Mhm.
to try to give your best description of what a tangent is, Ed? Kind of like where
Okay.
it's like trickery of the eyes,
Yeah.
where
So let's say when we've got two objects and they come up against each other, we can see that they're up against each other, right? And when they're on the same plane, that is like they're side by side. In this case, my two hands, they form a line that's showing that they're ridged together, right? Okay,
like in
and
this
that's
example.
normal because I'm punching my fists together, and you're going to see them interlocked, and you're going to see
Mm.
that line, right? That's kind of normal. But what happens sometimes is when I'm drawing and I happen to have an object here and then an object behind it, and this line perfectly aligns with this line, it confuses
Mm.
things. It confuses the planes, like as in this is foreground, this is midground, or something like that. And it confuses the like as an artist and as the reader, the readability of what's ahead of that and what's behind and all those types of things gets really, really confusing. Like in this case, whose hair is whose or something like that.
The
It had
outline of the shape.
yeah, a tangent adds tons of confusion. So if you ever like, yes, when I take a photo, this might be that it's perfectly aligned with the face, and yes, it might perfectly be that way, right? But when we're drawing it, there's certain things in real life that don't read well in drawings, and this is one of them. So what you want to do is either move it away or move it overlapping or something like that to
Mm.
show that they're not the same object. Okay,
Mm.
so a tangent is a kind of an adjoining line or a merging line or whatever that causes confusion and that is not
Hmm.
wanted. So this would be wanted. This would be unwanted. Okay. Hopefully that explains it a little
Beautiful
bit.
description.
Okay, cool. Next up, Mike Nabel, I think his name is Michael
Mm.
Nabel.
Gorgeous page, Mike.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this one. Okay, let's see. I'll start with the flow. The flow kind of brings me here. Not much is bringing me here, but it's not also not bringing me here. These two characters are kind of pointing me slightly down here. This one's pointing, literally pointing me in this direction. This one's not really bringing me anywhere. So I have to kind of make the leap of faith to come back here. I've got this. She's kind of bringing me over to here. This is centered and this is centered. So it's not too bad of a drop down. Sometimes, though, yeah, there can be a little bit of confusion here, but usually we go top, bottom, right? Nice page. I'm gonna get rid of all that, and I'm just gonna say overall, I love the character designs. It's kind of got an anime feel to it. I love the composition that I'm looking at here. You know, a lot of times the word balloons, the tails of them intersecting. Some people will say it's a no-no. In this particular case, I actually really like it. I think
Works
it
well.
works well. It's a nice compositional choice, right? It's very framing, right? Um, the one thing that kind of stood out to some of the judges when we were doing this before was this copy paste, right?
Oh,
It's not just a copy paste, but it's the exact same sizing. You know, like it's from one panel to the exact next panel. Like, listen, as artists, I think we try to save time, and I've been known to like reuse poses I've done and all this kind of stuff. And I've kind of copy paste something something once in a while or whatever, right? I get it. But in this case, having it from P3 to P4, same sizing, if this was zoomed in and his face was this big or something, maybe it wouldn't be as blatant or anything like that. But
you know
this
what's
stands out.
crazy?
It stands
I
out
don't
too much.
I don't know that that's technically copied and pasted, but it almost looks like it is, regardless. And so you really want to create some variation there, even if you just take his head
Yeah.
down, have him smiling in that next panel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's close enough to look like a copy paste. Now that I'm looking at it closer, I'm actually seeing differences here. Now, if I
Yeah.
want to zoom in a little bit, I'm actually seeing some differences here, right? The band is a little bit wider on the side and stuff like that. It's just, this is way too much. Yeah. So I'm going to retract that. This is not a copy paste. Well, no,
Mm.
it could have been as a reference as the sketch, use the same sketch twice and just
Yeah.
redrew it differently. And again, I've done that. It's called reskinning. Like you have a sketch, you have like a head in a certain you've already done kind of the mannequin sketch, the blank, and you're going to carry that through, or you're going to carry that pose, that hand. I don't know how many times I've like taken a hand I've drawn and then used it again and used it
Mm,
again, right? Like it happens. But the faux pas here is using it same size, next panel. That's the problem.
mm.
Moving on to the next one. Oh, okay. I'm kind of happy.
Epic.
I really like this entry. This works extremely well. We've got a directional explosion. We've got the Waffle House and even a waffle sign and stuff. And we come into the next panel and this massive reveal of our four heroes in the foreground and the baddies in the mid ground, right?
Mm.
Um, Two little critiques that I'm not totally in love with here. So I love the directional lines. Like I don't know if this was an app or if they hand did these or something, right? So some of these directional lines make a lot of sense. They're exactly from the explosion. But weirdly, the font he used is changing the directional lines. And I don't know, if I was him, I might have like adjusted the wording a little bit or something. Like if this is a font and it's got this directional motion attached in the font, that might be right. I don't know if he applied it to a font or if it's
Mm.
attached to the font. But if it's attached to the font, I would have angled each of those letters to make sure I kept with that same directional momentum. It's a really cool effect he's got going here, but it gets a little mishmashed, or a little conflicted there, right? Um, yeah, Clayton, I don't know. You have any thoughts on this one? This entry?
Yeah, actually, with the first panel, let me
Mm-hmm.
start off by saying, love your style. I think you got a solid style happening there,
Yeah.
and I'm enjoying the attention to detail too. Those pancakes are making me hungry. What I will say is, if we look out the window, you've done a great job of expanding the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Giving us a sense of place, telling us that there's a bigger world out there within this story. It makes it feel larger than what it actually is, as I said in the previous entrant. But here's the thing: the perspective looks off. It doesn't seem to be consistent with the perspective that you pick for the interior of the building, and so you start to get strange scaling effects. And what I'm saying here is that the buildings in the background look way smaller than they should be. And you know what? I know you felt like you had to draw the tops of those buildings so that we would know that they were buildings, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I mean, you could just have them go straight up. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at the window of a restaurant and I'm in the middle of the city, I'm not going to be seeing the top of those buildings. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how far away they are, unless they're like way off into the distance or something like that. But that's just something to, make sure that you're paying attention to, keeping in mind is that the perspective of everything, the room the characters are in, where the characters are placed, how they're placed, and everything outside that room, if we can see it, needs to be following the same perspective that you've set up. The only other thing that I'll point out here is, for the most part, the characters are drawn well, anatomy's pretty good, except for the lovely lady who's holding those pancakes I mentioned before. Her arm, the one that's holding the
Mm-hmm.
pancakes, seems a little bit wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's a tricky pose, it's a tough pose. I don't know if you use a reference for that, but if you didn't, certainly use a reference. And even if you did, maybe it could be an issue with the foreshortening, could be an issue with the shape that's surrounding her anatomy there,
Yeah.
representing her anatomy. That's what shape gives us as an indication of the anatomy. Believe it or not, everyone besides Ed, for the most part, even if they got massive muscles, you can't really see the separations within those muscle groups. Usually it's
Sure.
defined by shape.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
get the shape right and it'll look correct.
And that, yeah, it's got a little Gumby thing going on, a little rubbery there, right?
Looks a little
Yeah.
rubbery, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is Michael McDonald here.
All right, Michael McDonald. So, I'm going to talk about your gutters first. You need to make sure that they look a little bit more consistent. So I'd bring the bottom of that top panel down so that it's sitting closer to the panels that come afterwards. The overlapping is, I can see what you were doing there. I I don't know. I would look at some examples of floating panel comics, especially those from the 90s, the ones that read well, where you can tell what's going on, just to get some ideas for shapes and overlapping there. This is I can see that you've done your best effort. It's working
Hmm.
for now. Yeah, I think you can certainly improve on it, develop it further in order to enhance the experience you want us to have of reading the story. Now I'm going to talk about your faces for a moment. Um, it'd really help you out to get more practice with the profile views, with the portrait views as well, no doubt. Now, in particular, you've got the facial features placed in a proportionally accurate manner. Okay, in other words, the eyes are the distance that they should be away from the nose and the mouth, etc. Right? But what's probably throwing things off, in particular with that side shot in the third panel, is just the shape, especially the shape of the nose, the shape of the forehead. In a woman, you really don't want it slanting back too much because you will get a caveman effect happening. It'll get, it's making that frontal cortex look just a little bit too small when it
Hmm.
should be more developed, especially in a lady. You want that nice and round. And yeah, the nose probably is the area that really needs the most work, and also the mouth. I can see that you were trying your best to get a smiling mouth happening on the page in that side face shot, but you got to get some references up for that, because trying to draw a smile, especially without reference and a little bit of stylization, can really go bad, right? It can
Hmm.
look very scary. It can look like the Joker. So get some references up. Look at some, other stylized artwork that comic book artists have done, and try to see if you can find some examples of smiles that they might have drawn onto the page, because that add it to the reference library.
Good call.
Let's go down to the bottom of that first
Oh,
page for a
all right.
moment. So I just want to say, fairly good job on the shape of the anatomy, the outer shape. I think that's looking pretty
Hmm.
good. You got the shoulders, you got the biceps, etc. And the details are fairly good to go. I think that's mostly up to style. So well done there. Let's go to the next page, Ed.
Okay.
Okay, so the top panel, it looks almost like a different style. It looks like an explosion maybe from Rick and Morty. You know,
It's interesting. I almost think it looks like snow.
yeah, it does look almost like snow, and it looks mostly like smoke. This is an explosion, so we
Yeah.
want to see some fire, maybe some something. We
Well,
want to see the
how about
explosion itself.
some explosion lines, right? Like some type of
Yeah.
some motion lines here or something like that,
Hmm.
like show the debris coming out, right? And those types of things, right? And then a waffle,
Yep. Because let's ask ourselves, what is exploding here? Does the
right?
viewer
This
know
is
what's exploding?
a black box. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
And just that waffle there is enough to give me a clue as to what's exploding here. And then we got
Hmm.
the heroes getting up, and that would have been a great shot. But
Hmm.
then in the bottom panel, we've got maybe three minor villains, but we haven't been introduced to the main villains, which
Hmm.
this panel is really dedicated to.
Hmm.
Get rid of the heroes. They're in the previous panel. We can see them. They don't need to be there.
Hmm.
Get those villains in, the main villains, and shine the spotlight on them. Bring the attention to them, because this is their moment.
Yeah. Yeah, this
And
whole panel, right?
just let me say for a moment, and we could apply this to literally all of the entrants. Try a few thumbnail sketches first, because that's going to give you variety. The first option is not always going to be the best option. In fact, sometimes, most of the time, it's not. So for that bottom panel, what you could have done is you could have had like 5 different rough sketches that you came up with, each with variations, different angles, different positions of the characters, and you'd be surprised by what you could come up with potentially, and the different options that you'd have available to you then, instead of just that first idea that pops into your head.
And then I'm going to say this. You ever see those old, I don't know, I don't see it anymore, but I used to see those old movies where the director was always like this and he was kind of zooming in and
Mm,
coming back and all that. That's what I would do
yeah.
here is I would like, let's see, I'll make a new layer here and kind of make a box, right? And I'll just take this box, maybe a little bit thicker. Sorry.
Yeah, there you
There we
go.
go. Something like that. And I'm going to transform it. I'm just going to say, okay, well, where's the vital piece here? Is it this whole panel? I don't know. What if I bring it in? Does that still work? Does this crop still convey exactly what it did without taking up all that real estate? Right. So when you do thumbnails, after you've thumbed out 2 or 3 or whatever, sit there and say, okay, well, what's vital in this? What do I really want to show? And then crop it to show it. Right. Unless you really need all of that extra space in there for something special, right? This crop might be more effective. Just really think about it. Once you take Clayton's advice to do all those thumbs, take the time to really say, okay, well, what's vital in this? And
Yeah.
then you bring it to the page and you start to invest your time in it.
And by sketches, by the way, I just mean it doesn't have to be a full character sketch for every single thumbnail. It can just be a circle or an oval, roughly the size of the character. Figure out where the positioning is going to be, how they're going to be framed. That's what you need to primarily have down when it comes to sequential storytelling.
Totally. Okay, on to the next one. Marius, what's his last name again? Marius Rionico? Rionico? Okay. First thing,
Nice.
again, I'm looking at panel flow, so I'm just going to kind of jump in here. Great scene, but nothing's really bringing me down to here. Once I'm here, though, it kind of brings me over. I don't know if anything brings me down here, logic, but other than that, and again, kind of brings me to here, but what does? Nothing, again, logic, right? And maybe this brings me down. This centers me. Okay, well, not bad, but doesn't really do much for me in panel flow. Panel flow number 2, everybody's just kind of staring at the viewer here, which is okay because they're staring at what's coming and this is what's coming. It's not amazing, but I also don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, right? Going back, oh, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around here. There we go. Going back to this, I want to say this artist, I love their pencils. The
Oh,
emphasis
yeah.
on eyes and stuff like that, like how they draw faces, just
Emotion.
emotion in the face, the eyes. I could have this as a page of floating heads. If you look at like the values here, dark around the eyebrows, eyes, mouth, and all that kind of stuff. And this, some of the musculature and everything is just hinted at, right? It's just
It's
nicely light,
beautiful.
right? It's a very, very beautiful drawing. And when we get into beautiful drawings, it does not get more beautiful than this last panel here, right? Like I have a feeling if he would have rendered the rest of this, it would be insane. I'm not even going to talk about P1 here, this first panel. I know he just kind of roughed some lines in, and that's all it was, right?
Mm.
Um,
This is one of
I
my favorite panels. My
yeah,
favorites.
it's scary. Like I think this should be on TV or something like that. Like this is so badass. The one thing I think I would do though is she's punching forward, and I really like it. I like how the monsters in the background are just these faceless wonders and stuff like that. Blastar here kind of looks like
Mm.
Ulick, but I like it. But what I might have done here is kind of just maybe to make this pop a little bit from the panel above. I might have haloed her crown a little bit,
Yeah.
and
Just
let's
thicker
see how
line weights will make her
just
stand out.
just sorry, I'm a little wobbly here, but let's see if that looks there. Do you see how now all of a sudden she's punched ahead? And this could be because it's not finished. Maybe he's going to do it. Maybe sometimes we wait for the colorist to take hold of it and pop certain things forward and stuff like that. But again, that just changed it, right? So here it's kind of blending from one panel into her head and stuff, right? Here, that pops it forward, right?
Mm.
Overall, though, I think this is a very strong entry. That the only thing I'm going to critique a little bit is choices in real estate. Here's the shot. I don't mind all of this because it's an establishing shot. I don't know what he was going to do with these faces. This could have maybe been cropped even a little bit more or something like that. But again, it's an establishing shot. But I just find he spends a lot of time in the back.
Oh
Most
yeah.
people spend no time in the background, and he's spending time in the
Mm.
background here. And I'm wondering, hmm, is it needed? Does he have time for that and everything?
I
Right? Like,
mean,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's a bit of a choice. I don't know. What do you think of this entry, Clayton?
Yeah, it might not be needed, but look, I'll tell you that top panel and also the one the second bottom panel,
Yeah,
just so much depth. And
yeah,
it is a good sense of place, I think, when you can add those backgrounds in.
yep.
They can be a little bit distracting sometimes, though. So, it depends. You got to make those decisions.
And you got to
But
figure maybe some of this is going to be covered by dialogue, by word bubbles. So like
absolutely.
you might spend that time drawing in those faces or whatever. And he didn't. He's kind of picking and
Mm.
choosing a few things here and stuff, right? But
Mm.
you might be losing it underneath the bubble.
And I just want to say one last thing here. Look, Ed talked about the sequential storytelling and readability of this narrative that's unfolding here.
Hmm.
Obviously, don't take those critiques as being super harsh.
Hmm.
They're just things that can help. And the reason I say that is I can see that you put a lot of effort into those drawings. I can see the effort that you've made here. So if it's sequential storytelling that you've just got to improve on and you've got the rest down, I mean, you just figured out what you need to level this thing up.
This half a millimeter overlap is a little strange.
Yeah, bring that
Bring it
panel
down or bring it
down
up.
or up. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit of a
that's a
weird one
panel
there.
tangent right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Next up is Levi Olson. The ones he sent in are a little small. So
Okay.
let's see what we can do here.
Yeah, that's all right. Hey, this reminds me of some early Marvel stuff, actually,
Totally.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that
Uh,
too.
yeah, so first panel's pretty good. Look, I probably would have stretched that out a little bit more, give it more width, because it's an establishing shot, right? It's a sense of
Mhm.
place. You can keep everything small, just like you've done there, but show us, where they are. And the reason that I say that is because the next panel is a close-up headshot, so it really doesn't need to take up a huge amount of space. Um, just
Mhm.
a little tip there. When you're thinking about the establishing shot, think of scenery. Like, how can you get the most amount of scenery into the panel? So you stretch it out. You make it wider. You can make it narrower you can make it. You can give it less height though, right?
Mhm.
Because you get that nice panoramic view happening.
True.
And then you've got you got the third panel there. Look, it's a 1 point perspective shot, but I think it works. It shows
Mhm.
the context of the situation that's unfolding. They're having a good yak, a good conversation. They're talking about doing this arm wrestle thing. And then, I think all the panels are pretty solid, to be honest with you. I just want to say that last panel, super cool because we've got Thor, jumping out of his seat in excitement. It just
Yeah.
reminds me of when you're with a group of buddies, the two of them end up having an arm wrestle, and either you're there or the rest of your friends are there cheering them on. You can see that Thor's really, he's really excited.
Totally.
So great representation of emotion there. They do look like they're getting a little bit serious in the second panel, though. So I'd lighten things up a bit. Maybe give a bit of a smirk, a bit of an eyebrow raise,
Yeah, right. A
just
little smirk here.
yeah, just so the viewer knows it's not super serious. These facial emotions, as subtle as they are, can really, tell us, the viewer, what the flavor of the situation is.
Hmm.
Whether it's angry, whether it's sad, whether it's happy. In much the same way, I might look at Ed's face, see these micro expressions of annoyance or anger, and I might be like, okay, Ed's not happy with me today. All right, so we've got the explosion in the top panel. It's obviously, if you had more time, I would go ahead and refine that a little bit further
Sure.
just so that we can tell what's going on. Get some, I think I can see a bit of a waffle sign in there. Uh, I,
Geez,
I
that's
think
hard. Maybe,
it's
there.
really hard to tell, but you know, any
Yeah,
clues that you
unfortunately.
can leave us to tell what's happening with the
Yep.
waffle place that's exploding,
Yep.
that's always a plus.
Yep.
And then in the bottom panel, I think I think this is pretty cool. The only thing is that they're looking at the camera,
Hmm.
and so you know, really they should be staring down the heroes. I think. Well, I mean, I say should, but it's ultimately up to whatever you feel the story needs and will be most effective. But I do think if they're facing off with the heroes, they need to be looking at them. And you know how you do that is tough because I know why you've got them looking at the camera. You want the viewer to see who they are. You want to
Hmm.
present them,
Hmm.
and so if you want to present them, probably having it so that the heroes are in the background, right? Well, sorry, the heroes are in the foreground
Right.
based on our point of view. You don't have to show them all. You don't have to show their faces. You don't really have to show necessarily anything. Just having Thor's hand with his hammer in the panel, and a few other different
Silhouette.
iconic visual cues as to who
Yep.
these characters are. You can keep them vague, right? As long as they're in the foreground, and what we have then in front of them is the villains, blown
Hmm.
up, scaled up. Yes, they'll look closer, but we'll get a better view of them. And so rather than having them super far away from one another, bring those villains into closer to the foreground where the heroes are, and then we get that nice scaled up representation of them, the glory shot, which is really what this last panel is about.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think that the choice of them all facing our direction generally, like this one, I like the call to arms. He's like, the horde, get these guys. I get that, but
Ah,
it's
yeah,
just too
true.
consistent through all of this, right? I will say on this panel though, the shot choices, mid range, close up, mid range again, over the shoulder, 3/4 bird's eye. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Close up, like just Levi did a really good job of changing up the
mm.
angles and the shot depth. Good
Yeah,
job, man.
you've got some awesome drawing skills there. Your anatomy is on point. Your proportions are very, very accurate. Great
Yep.
posing, good facial expressions, as long as they're appropriate for the situation.
Hmm.
Awesome job all round as far as the technical abilities of drawing that you possess.
See if I.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know if I can
Subtle.
throw something in here or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah,
right, and maybe a raised eyebrow.
yeah, there you go. Beautiful. Perfect.
Something. Do you know what I mean? Like that. That
It's
actually kind
playful
of
now.
works. Like, it, obviously,
Mm.
some take some time to refine that or whatever. But like, look at that, just raised eyebrow and a little smirk. All of a sudden, it works.
Mm-hmm.
A smirk
There you go.
works. Okay, next up, we've got. Oh, geez, this name slays me.
Ooh.
Ketchatli Taltekatsin.
That's a
That's
long name, Ed.
that's what I'm gonna do with that one. Um,
Can we give him a
yeah,
nickname? Can we shorten it somehow?
Katzen. I'm going with
There we
Katzen.
go.
Okay, so Katzen, is this yours or mine? This is mine, right?
Yep.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 panels here. Overall, I like the look of it. Let's see. I've got a bit of a panel flow. What's going on here? The perspective of this panel brings me a little bit in the direction of P2, but then P2 is just a continuation of that perspective. And then we kind of change, like, do you know what I mean? Everything seems to be just this. Now we're slightly angled this way, and then we're slightly more angled this way, and then we tilt even more this way. It's this weird, like this camera kind of just zoomed in like this, and maybe that's the effect he wanted. But then we're back to this angle again. I you
Hmm.
know I don't know. It's all kind of a 2 point per. Is it a 2 or is it a 1? Or I mean a 3?
I
Maybe
mean, it's all
I don't know. I can't tell.
it's all almost the same shot, Ed, especially
Yeah,
in
this
those
is a
four middle
right.
panels.
This is the same kind of shot with just like almost the exact same angle, just coming in, and like maybe the camera comes down a little bit or it comes up a little bit, but this is almost all the same shot, right?
Hmm.
So that doesn't lend itself very well to panel flow. That's one issue, right? Looking at panel 2 or page 2 rather, we've got the Waffle House, and I can tell it's a Waffle House, and I can tell it's an
Hmm.
explosion. I dig it.
Cool explosion.
Yeah, the electricity is coming off and stuff, wrapping around into the next panel. I like that. The reveal, he or she is doing what we've asked before. Just show the back of our heroes. Okay, and see what I'm
Yeah.
doing here. Like I'm trying hard here, but like, what am I? There we go. Okay. This is where my critique of him is going to come in a little bit. Is that, oh no, here. Sometimes the separation of forms is tough. Like these characters are in the foreground and these guys are in the background, but they're both rendered the exact same way. They look like they're standing an inch away from each other. Do you know what I mean? Like if I take this away, they are butt up against each other. Like, in fact, I can't tell like which form is overlapping which in some places because they're both rendered with the same rendering style. Meaning the
Yes.
only thing that's different is the background buildings are they've got less rendering to them, but every single character, no matter how far back, is rendered in this basically a heavy rendering style, right? And what
Yes.
that does is it prevents, like, usually what do? We see more detail on something that's close to us than something that's mid than something that's far, right? Like that's the human eye. We see all that detail up close, unless there's some lens focus trick that we're using, right? And so anything up close is going to have hyper detail, mid detail, minor detail, right?
Exactly. That's what gives
And
it depth.
his rendering style, although it's very cool, doesn't lend itself to that at all. Everything looks like it's on the same plane. Okay. It's all
Mm.
like butt up against each other because it's all rendered the same. And so even though I really, really love his style and really, really love the art, there's no separation of planes because he's choosing to just have that rendering style, right?
And so what you've got to do to correct that is either give the heroes more shadow, more rendering, or give the villains less, and that'll create the separation that you're looking for, the level of
Something.
depth within the scene.
Some people will use a halo, and you've seen me do it before or whatever, like a heavy line that's separating the foreground or a character in the foreground from the background and stuff like that. It's a bit of a cheat. A lot of people don't like that haloing, right? I do it because as a colorist, that was my getaway, right? To separate some things once in a while. But yeah, it in this pencil stage, if this was submitted, an editor would be like, no, no, no. A colorist would have to save this, right? A colorist would have to come in and work it so that saturation and value punch the foreground forward and stuff. It can be done, but yeah, that's what would happen. I don't know.
That
Any quick
said,
thoughts on this one, Clay?
yeah, I just want to say, that said, it is an epic shot in that
Totally.
last panel. You've done a great job, and the shadowing you have done on the characters is technically correct. Like you've shaded the muscles and the anatomy well. It's just a matter of now figuring out how much you need in order to get the depth happening within the scene. Let's go to the first page, though. There was something that I wanted to say there. So here's the biggest problem besides what Ed no, might not be the biggest problem, but it's another problem besides what Ed was talking about with the flow. The second problem with having shots like this that are all really consistent with one another, with just a slight amount of variation happening, maybe with the zoom or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if it's all the same shot like this, it creates an uninteresting page. It makes it feel boring.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, no offense, but that is the effect that ends up happening. That's why we add variation in there. So it's like, whoa, we're in. Whoa, we're over here. Whoa, we're over there. And so, the eyes are kept engaged
Mm-hmm.
when you introduce that variation. So that's just one thing that I would say. You've got the rest mostly sorted. Your anatomy is sick, man. And you've got great ability to shade and to do your lighting. Really good work on the poses and the expressions of the characters. So this is really just a little addition that you can add to your comic art arsenal of tools in order to enhance your sequential storytelling abilities even more. Add the variation in there.
Totally. Clay, you're up with Keith Poor.
Yeah, all right. So, obviously there's a lot of room for you to evolve and to grow as a comic book artist, but I got to commend you on jumping into a competition like this and really pushing yourself to come up with interesting shots such as what we're looking at here on the page. It takes bravery and it takes initiative to be able to jump into something like this. So well done. You just got massive experience points from doing so. Let's talk about what can be improved here, what you can focus on next to level up. So, in this first panel, it's an angled top-down shot. It's working fairly well. I can see that you blurred out the background in those windows. I'd get in there with a smaller pencil or pen and just outline a little bit more of the details outside so that it does feel like a bigger, wider world, because these look like kind of frosted windows at the moment. I would just center the characters in that panel a little better. I don't think where they're positioned right now is necessarily working. I think you could probably bring them over into the center, and that would bring our attention to them better, because you've sort of got all this empty space almost over to the left, and all you've really placed there is a speech bubble. So, center the characters. I think that would work better. In the next panel, you got the characters talking, chatting. You got one in the foreground, one in the middle ground, one in the background. It's pretty good. But besides just technical drawing ability, of course you can improve there, but the shot itself is okay. And then in the third panel and the fourth panel, I'm seeing. I think the biggest issue with that one is that you've cut off Thor's face. And it's an awkward cut. It's not that it wouldn't work. It's just the angle of the gutter and the panel border. It's a little bit strange the way in which you've done it. But
I'll
you know
say the
what?
word, it's muting. It's weird when you cut off somebody's mouth, like just cut here. That cuts communication. Like it's a really very strong message, right? Like, and then what happens there, right? So that has a much stronger message than I think this artist intended.
And absolutely. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean the positioning of the characters, I think you've done a great job on that. You've really tried your best to fit them all into these panels. Just remember, as with the third and fourth, you don't need to do it all the time. In that initial establishing shot, if we get a sense for where they are in relation to one another, then you just want to fit their heads or their upper bodies, bust shots into the panels that follow, then that works. I mean, we already know where they are based on that initial establishing shot. So, again, just thinking about the real estate you've got available to you in each panel, you can pick and choose. And this is the thing with, I guess you could say, team comics. In other words, comics like the X-Men, right? There's how many X-Men? Like a bazillion of them, probably 5 or so in the main team. Now, if you're doing a comic of the X-Men, just because it's about the X-Men, you don't need them all in one panel shot, right? So
in every shot. Yeah.
Exactly. But, I think that. Yeah, I can see that you've done that with the third and fourth, just something that you could do a little bit more if you would like.
Just a quick thing before we go on to the next page. We could see this hand is basically a tube in this perspective, right? Do you understand? So like he's holding it and you can see like it's angled away. So the fork would be coming towards him, right? That's how it's reading.
It should be.
Yet somehow it bends and the waffle, we can see the top of it. We should be able to, from this, if the waffle, what's something flat I can use here? Aha. The waffle, I should be seeing it like this, not like this. It's a perspective issue. It's on the fork, he jabbed it, and it's a flat triangular disc or whatever thing, right? And it should be like this. Instead, what's happening is it's showing like this.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird, right? And like it's warping the perspective. It would have been an easy shot just to have something like this, right?
For sure. Okay. And hey, that's a cool detail. Just remember as well, though, that because the other guy's talking, Hercules, you could have that fork just in his mouth. He could have shoved that waffle into his mouth and just be listening to him, and then, that's pretty cool.
Chewing away. Yep.
But I like the detail. I do. All right, and then we've got the final panel here. We got the exploding Waffle House.
Yep.
I think that grab a reference of what an explosion looks like, of what an exploding building actually appears as, and use that, because what you've gone ahead and done here is you've thought about what it might look like and you've based your finished drawing on what you think rather than what actually is. And we all have our own representation of what we think something might look like. It's usually very basic and very generic. So, in order to get those details and the uniqueness of your illustration happening on the page, go
Mhm.
ahead, find some references so you can get the details drawn in there that you might not have necessarily considered.
Mhm.
I
Just a
do like,
quick note, I flipped
hmm,
it. I think the energy beams moving us this way,
hmm,
left to right, would have been better than the other way. I'll move it
yeah.
back. I don't know. It just
Hey,
seems a little contrary to our line of
hmm,
motion, right?
oh yeah. And I do like the bottom panel. I think that's
Mhm.
working really well. You've got a nice scaled up representation of the villains, so we get a good look at them, which is what we need in this last panel. And then we've got the heroes in the foreground, and you've actually tilted the camera downwards, looking upon them
Yep.
from above. And I think that's a good choice here. You have to do some of that trickery sometimes.
Mhm.
The 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 camera magic in order to sometimes fit a whole bunch of characters into the one panel.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've gone ahead and you really considered it, you've thought about it. The only other thing that I'll say on your submission is, as far as the colors are concerned, it's great that you've really tried your best to, give this a splash of color to
Mhm.
increase the excitement, the engagement, the mood. It's not necessarily needed though, especially if you've got, a little bit more growth to do with your coloring skills. And I do think that you do. I can see that you're trying your best with it. You've got some great lighting happening.
Mhm.
Um, I would, if I was to critique your coloring, which this isn't necessarily really about, but just real quick, I'd say, you want to define your shapes, the areas with surrounding shadow on the character's anatomy with some harsher divisions. So actually think about the shape of the shadow that you're drawing as if you were inking it. Sorry, coloring as if you were inking it,
Mhm.
because that'll make your characters look more defined. Everything looks very soft and airbrushed right now, right? And
And that's the thing I was going to key on is that and this was something that I talked about previous entries. I remember Andy Liu, and then Andy ended up
mhm,
taking my coloring course, and he's like, "Oh my god, like everything's changed now."
there you go.
Every beginner colorist wants to use airbrush blacks for shading, and I'm going to say don't. Please
Yeah,
don't. And this
no,
isn't coming at Keith or anything like that. This is coming at everybody who all of a sudden gets a digital program on their iPad or whatever it is and starts shading in black with an airbrush and everything. Because I know I did it too. It comes out muddy. It comes out soft. You lose your form. You're not really showing what lights are happening here. And it really does a disservice to everything else that's going on in your work and stuff like that. So think about it. Just
because you've got some pretty good line art going on.
yeah,
Great shape. Your
yeah,
anatomy kind of checks out. I mean, it does check out. It looks good. You seem to know
yeah.
where the main muscle groups sit. The proportions, of course, could always be improved, but you're 80, 90% there already.
Hmm.
And all of that, all of the positives of your line art will be overlooked by the colors. And so if you're going to color it, you want to make sure that the colors are leaving a final awesome impression on the
Totally.
viewer. So if you're not peak colorist mode and you're more confident with your line art, make sure you stick with your line art. If you know you can do that and you know you can smash it with your line art in a competition,
Hmm.
I wouldn't even worry about the colors. Just pay more attention to the line art, spend the additional time you would have spent coloring, polishing that up.
Well, I'm going to say, this is a competition, but this is also a learning process, right? So I'm
It
cool
is,
with
of course.
people stepping out of their comfort and just saying, okay, hey, what do you guys think of this? This is my first time coloring a panel page like this. What do you think and stuff? And yeah, my thoughts are ditch the black airbrush. That's
Yeah.
that's a must. You got to get rid of it, man. Okay. Next up is Juan Toro. You up or am I up? I think I'm up. Are you up? No, you did
I,
Keith. I'm up with Juan here. Right? You were the first up with Keith.
yep.
Okay. So I kind of like this because this angles myself this way. This panel brings me this way. Her eyes bring me over. This panel angle brings me over here. Her looking this way brings me over. Nice and dead center. It's a reasonable enough flow that it kind of gives me this zigzag Z going on, right? So I like it. Looking at it overall, we've got a variation of shots, right? I think we didn't have to have this 3/4 upward, 15 foot in the air shot twice or whatever. But then we come to a close up, we're changing our depth, right? How close the
Hmm.
camera is. We've got a bird's eye view here. We've got another close up here. We've got this is almost haloing, like you'd see. That's what I was talking about earlier, is how the outline of this foreground sets it apart from the background. So I really like this. There's a lot of great things. Actually, I like so much about this, right? Like cute little styles. I think there's some inconsistency in what's the shape of skulls here, maybe, and the breaking of necks, maybe, so the shape
Hmm.
of the skull, the breaking of the neck. I could see the artist doing a little bit more work on that, right?
Yeah.
Page number 2. Chose a side panel. I don't mind the explosion being a smaller panel, but it's almost blasting into Herc's head here, and so I think a
Mm.
reworking of that, rethinking. I like the eye pop. I can see what's exploding. I like the explosion. It's a simplified panel. That's fine. It fits with him. Looking at
Hmm.
this, we've got the baddies kind of ringing this way, and our heroes coming here. I like that Herc is huge. Hercules is a big guy. I just feel like the composition here, how we're choosing this. Let's see if I back this out. Sorry, I put it on the same layer. But if I have my composition like this, and then I have this, and then I take this away, that's not really that impactful. Do you know what I mean? Like the
Mm.
general flow of things, right? Like
Yeah.
I think they could have uh, had this maybe ringing just a little bit more and have these guys a little bit more centered. And
Mm.
then we take it away and we can see how this might be a stronger composition or something like that.
Mm.
Here's a small focus. Here's the bigger focus and stuff, and I can start drawing the heads in there and the bodies and stuff, right? So, one, check out like why you're choosing certain compositions, right? Like, uh, why are why are these guys a little bit off to the right? Maybe this panel bumped you.
Mm.
Maybe this panel should have been more up top here. You guys could have centered things and just done it that. Eye pop is very cute. Really like it. And the first page I really, really like. Any thoughts,
Yeah.
Clayton?
Yeah, go to that last page for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all about points of attention.
Hmm.
If we're looking at that bottom panel, where does our eyes go first? It goes to the bad guy's hand, right,
Yep.
which is creating the energy ball. Okay,
Hmm.
that's cool, but where are you taking us on the journey? My eyes go to the eye pop, right? Is that really an important thing that I should be focused on? Where do your eyes go, Ed? Would that be a similar situation,
Honestly,
right?
yeah. Like I gotta say, like I kind of go from here up to here, and then maybe into her helmet a little bit, and then I kind
Mm.
of jump down here, and I lose that there's a figure half covered right here. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And then finally, I kind of come over here, and then I look up here, and I see these guys or something like.
Yeah, so just think beforehand. What do I want the viewer to pay attention to most? Okay, if it's the villains in the foreground first, you want to create somewhat of a visual hierarchy. Okay,
Mhm,
so and how do you control that? Well, you control it through contrast and value,
mhm,
right? You control it through scale, and so by using those dial knobs, turning them back and forth for different elements within the scene, that's how
mhm.
you're able to create the pathway of visual experience for the viewer. And
Totally.
that's if you want more information on that, look up Frank Frazetta and the ways in which he created his compositions, because there is
Mhm.
a great little article out there that'll give you more insight into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, moving on to the next one. Let's see. Her name is Gulwin Brabo. It might be a guy,
Oh,
it might be a girl. Their name
mm,
is.
Well, firstly, cool establishing shot. Thought. I
Mhm.
said shot, and I meant shot. And then we've got the buildings in the backgrounds outside the window. That's pretty cool. I think
Mhm.
that's, and what's awesome about this particular establishing shot that I'm noticing and was no doubt present within all the others, but I just want to point it out is that, hey, this is a sit-in waffle place, and that's what it looks like. That's what it feels like,
Mhm.
based on the design of the chairs, on the
Mhm.
color of the walls, on
Mhm.
the windows, and how they're, based on the architecture of the room that we're sitting in, the clothing of the waitress, the fact that she's bringing over pancakes. Again, it's all about those visual clues. So don't just think that you can just draw any old restaurant. This is kind of
Mhm.
advice for everybody. Don't think
Yeah.
that you can draw just any old restaurant and expect people to know that it's a waffle place your characters are sitting in. You got to actually leave visual clues to tell us that. And you've done a great job of doing so, my friend.
Mhm.
And in the bottom panels, yeah, the four panels you've got lined up in the middle section of the page, they're pretty good. They're sort of unexciting, though. They're all placed on an eye level camera placement,
Mhm.
and they're not really looking down at the characters. They're not really looking up at them. And even though we're looking at the cameras on the characters on some angles here, it still seems really flat to me. It feels flat. So what I'd say is somehow introduce more interest to these panels, especially when you've got talking heads, right?
Yeah.
Talking head panels where you've got characters just having a conversation at a restaurant, it can be really boring, right?
Mhm.
Just by default. It's a default boring situation. And so you've got to really do some tricky things with your camera angles and your perspectives in order to increase the excitement. So, you might put one character in the foreground, right? Which is what you kind of have done in panel 3, right? That's cool.
And 5.
And 5, there you
Yeah.
go. But it just doesn't feel that obvious to me for some reason.
Mhm.
Have you got some thoughts on that, Ed? What am I trying to say here?
No, I think you got it. Like when we look at the camera angle here, it stays consistent waist height, which is actually their seated chest height. And if we look at
Mm,
it, it's always like the camera angle, except for P5, stays at the chest height, right?
yeah,
P5
yeah.
is an over the shoulder look, slightly look down, right? Okay. And this
Hmm.
is just something that popped up to me as I'm looking at this and looking at a lot of other entries that have background shots is whenever we look at pictures of this Waffle House being blown up, and whenever I've been to Waffle Houses and pancake houses and all this kind of stuff, there's something about them that is pretty consistent. They are
Mm.
one stories. They are a one-story
Ah.
building. Their window is one story, like you're on the ground floor. They don't have second floors usually. They're not in a skyrise or anything. They are a standalone one-story building. And you see all the entries that show it blowing up, show it as that usually, right? Then why, when I look out the windows of so many of these entries from a camera that's sitting down around waist height, I am looking at the second floor of every building coming down. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like what I should be doing is looking at a street view out these windows.
Mm.
I should be looking straight at the street as if I'm sitting in a restaurant and looking out. Oh, that's what that looks like. I am looking out straight at the street. I'm not that all of the like a lot of these entries are showing me on the second floor of a building
Hmm.
and kind of wondering why. Right. I don't maybe because they want to show the tops of buildings or something like that, but that's not needed, right? Like so
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. Just go sit in a restaurant next time you're sitting there. Sit and look out the window and just see your perspective. What are you
Hmm.
looking at? How do the buildings look to you? Right? They don't look like this.
Yeah, you don't need to see everything in order to be able to tell what's going on as the viewer. You just need a
Yep.
clue, right?
Yep.
And so suggest what is in those panels. If it's a building, they don't need to see the whole building. They can just see, a window here
Well, look at
or
this.
a
We see the building in next one, and they're sitting on the main floor. So they would have just
oh.
saw, like, if they're looking out this building,
Mm.
all they would have seen is from this viewpoint, right? They're sitting
Hmm.
at the table, and this is what they would be seeing, is
Yeah.
the front door of other buildings and stuff, right?
Ed, I mean, you're pointing out something that's really, it's so easy to miss, but it
Totally,
is the details that matter. So,
totally.
really try to consider this stuff, think deeper on it,
Mhm.
and you'll be able to add those details in there to keep the story
And this is
consistent.
not the first person to make this mistake, right? We've seen
No,
it a
of
couple
course
times
not.
now.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's surprisingly common.
page two.
People really want to get the tops of those buildings in there,
Totally.
and then you got the hero shot in the panel just below that explosion shot,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool. I would add maybe a few more details into the heroes. I know that they're kind of covered with smoke,
Hmm.
but it's like it feels like they're being mysterious. They're hidden behind this smoke, and so is that the feeling that you want to get across to us? That they're hidden, that they're being mysterious, that they're about to be revealed.
Hmm.
If not, just show them maybe getting up, a little bit injured, head in their hands, like, well, what the heck just happened? Show that the explosion actually affected them.
Hmm.
And then you've got the villains in that bottom panel, and this is probably one of the biggest issues that I have with a lot of the bottom panels in this competition on the last page is that those villains just aren't getting the spotlight that they deserve, that this panel was really meant for. They're
Hmm.
tiny here, and there's really we got the two main ones, and then we got the goblins behind them or whatever they're supposed to be, and it's really unimpactful,
Hmm.
you know, and the truth of the matter is that you want it to have the most impact. This is the final panel of this sequence, and so you want to leave strong. This
Yeah.
is this is not the time to be slowing down. You want to really win the race here and go all out on those. So you got the heroes in the panel above. Why not give that bottom panel all to the villains? Right,
Hmm.
we already know the heroes are there looking at them, so you can have the villains looking right back at them, and you don't need to have them in there. Remember, it's all about suggestion. You suggested that they were already there in the panel before, so leave that bottom panel for the villains. Blow them up. Have some steam coming off of their hand because you just blasted the place.
Hmm.
Little additions like that. Maybe debris coming down around them as well. These are the things that are going to enhance that bottom panel in a very memorable way that the reader will think about afterwards.
Totally. Just a couple little points on this page for me. One, I love this explosion. I love the directional force of whatever it is coming in here and blowing out from it. I think, plus
Mm.
the set dressing with the waffles here and everything. I'd get rid of this font. I don't think it's doing anything for this. I don't even think it's needed. I've seen impactful fonts and everything. This totally isn't needed, right? This woodcut style, I think, is actually gorgeous, but it's almost like you said it correctly. Why are we making them mysterious? We already know who they are, right?
Mm.
So that, if we're going to choose to do something like this style, maybe not on this page or something like that, but keep that in your pocket for like the smoky reveal, right?
Mm.
Like, and then blast art here. Clayton hit it right, but I will say the one thing I did like is that they landed in a restaurant, and you can see a little bit of stuff from like the tile floor of a diner and stuff. I think that's
That
pretty
is
cool.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
cool. Just like
observation.
they had stuff in the diner here. Oh, sorry, one more thing on this first page. So the chair is in this perspective, right? Like with this angle to it. So that means, it would be whatever, like something like
Mm.
this or whatever, right? So this shoulder should be back here unless it's leaning forward. I don't know. This torso just seems out of sorts off
Yeah,
off of this chair, right? Here's the hip maybe, and then this head seems out of sorts for the torso,
I know what you're saying.
right? I know a lot of stylistic things are happening here and stuff like that, but like I would like, if I look at this character here, stylistically holds, but also the anatomy holds too. This one looks like a little off for me.
Yeah, what you could have done with that seat, just so it looks like the character is actually sitting on it in a
Hmm.
non-crooked way, is you could have simply made the width of the seat back narrower, and that would have
Totally.
pushed the foreshortening of it, and made it look more consistent. You know, these
Totally.
things, man, making characters
It
work
should
with
have been more like,
background props, it's tough.
yeah, it should have been more like this or something
Mm,
like that or whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
have
exactly.
the width of it here, the width of this chair, and then that would have just turned the chair for them, right? Yep.
Yep. On
Eh,
style though, you've got it sorted. Awesome stuff. Like you've been
Yep.
drawing for a while, I can tell.
Danny Silva.
All right, you're up, Ed.
Okay. Looking at directional flow, let's see. I've got a little bit of the panel direction, like the perspective leads me into here. This somewhat leads me into this panel. I'm not sure if anything brings me over to here other than it's just kind of a flat panel. This perspective one point kind of brings me here, and this arm kind of brings me down here. It's nudging me, but it's also misdirecting me. It's pointing me
Mm,
back to P1 and stuff, right? So I'm not gonna give it too many props for panel flow, but it's a little bit there, right? I
mm,
do like the variation of perspective in it, variation of camera depth and
true.
angle. I think there's some good things. For me, the biggest things is like inconsistency in head sizes and styles and stuff like that. Like here, this looks like a 40-year-old Natalie Portman, but then like the Thor's
Mm,
head's changing each time. The shapes are changing and stuff like that. They're to me, it's like there's some cool things going on in this, but the consistency in head sizing according to the bodies, according to the shot, is way off. Like,
proportions.
yeah, this one looks like a carnival dude at Mardi Gras or something like that. Like, when they carry the big giant heads down the road and
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? P2, let's see if anything changes. Um, we got a kaboom and we got we got a stool here. Look at this giant waffle. Oh my
Mm,
God. Hold on. I want to make
that's
that a little
awesome.
bigger. Look at that giant waffle. How cool is that? Right?
Yeah.
Like things like that. And I like this explosion. I like the boom, like the ringing of the projectiles and stuff like that, right? That's very cool. I really like this top panel here, right? Don't know if I like the texturing always on this, like the snakeskin patterning and
Mm,
stuff, but
mhm.
overall that's pretty good. Getting into the next one, this person did what we've asked many times. We've got the heroes in the foreground, just showing them a little bit, and we've got the review of these guys. Uh, Gotta say, it kind of drops the ball a little bit. One, because of this snakeskin everywhere and stuff like that. Two, this kind of like empty space here, right? And three, because these guys seem like the emphasis, not these guys,
Mm,
even though they're well drawn. The emphasis
yeah.
because of and I talked about this before, we see more detail in something close to us, and that's where we want to put our viewer's eye, right? And so shading in here on their faces, rendering their faces out, basically like adding depth and shadow to them and stuff, without doing that to the main people, means I want to be looking at these guys. It draws my eyes to them, and I'll back it out, and you can see why your eye is drawn to them.
Mm,
Right. So good page. I would tighten up on this blank space here and choose why I'm rendering something over something else.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I love the waffle. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
That's a great waffle. Awesome
Yeah.
idea. I would have done the same thing if I had to do this shot.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Okay. Next up, we've got Ashley A.
All right, Ashley.
Maybe I'll
Speaking of
zoom in a
great
little.
looking waffles,
Yeah.
those are perfect. Well
Yeah.
done.
Make me
Um,
hungry.
he- yeah, so we have a fairly standard establishing shot. I think
Mhm.
that works quite well. Maybe a little bit too flat with the 1 point perspective. Maybe you could have angled the camera somewhat there. Maybe not 100% necessary though.
Okay. Speaking of perspective, though, horizon line changes.
Oh, oh,
Look at this
yeah,
picnic table outside. It's a top down view of the picnic table that's more of a top down view than this table.
yep, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got some Inception effect happening,
Yeah.
right? Where
But
the
this dog holds true to their perspective. The man walking the dog.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you could have still fit those people on the picnic rug into the scene. You just put them further back and
Mhm.
make sure the perspective is
I
consistent
think
because
it's
the
actually
reason that you
table. And so what
Or
it
is it a
should,
picnic table?
yeah, it
Right.
should have
Yeah.
been like this. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, totally. That would have worked. But, other than that, I think that this shot is, I can see that you've really put some time into keeping it neat, refined, and
Mm-hmm.
I love the details on the seat. The
Mm-hmm.
cushions that you've added in there. That's awesome. The table is appropriate for a Waffle House. And you've also got the waitress in there. She's another clue. She's
Mm-hmm.
a set design element,
Mm-hmm.
a set dressing element that you've added in. So awesome work there.
Yeah. And even
And
this
then,
coat rack with the helmets and the
yeah, yeah,
Mjolnir
that's
on there and
great.
stuff like that. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Because the heroes would be relaxing. You're saying to us, the viewer, that these guys are not in a serious situation.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's cool. They're taking off the armor, and they're having a good time. So that's exactly what you want to do. Set the stage a little bit for us readers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the conversation unfolding in the following panels. I would have maybe created some more variation between panels 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, zoom in. If you're going to set the camera there in panel 2, zoom in on panel 3 so that we get a nice close up of their faces. You could even zoom it in further than in panel 4 if you want, so that you still got the variation between panel 3 and panel 4. Because really, I guess you've got the Hercules, he's laughing, and then you've got the lovely lady. What's her name again? I
You
look
could
so
call her Lady
uneducated.
Thor.
Lady Thor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Jane
double
Foster.
checking. So you've got Lady Thor there, and she's really the person that we're supposed to be listening to. So, I would just cut Thor out altogether in panel 3, have Hercules in the foreground, and then place, if we're looking at it, have Hercules here in the
Mm-hmm.
foreground over here, and then place Lady Thor right here.
Yep. Yep.
Then you've got then you've got the two of them. They got a decent amount of space, each of them. You don't have to have Thor there. We know where he is in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, moving forward, I'm going to say the same thing between panels 4 and 5. It's pretty much the exact same shot. So let's mix it up a bit in order to increase the interest. And in the bottom panel, yeah, again, it's almost the exact same shot in all of these panels.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of not the actions of the characters, but just where the camera is positioned and the angle that it's looking at them on. Even you've messed with the zoom a bit, so I'll give you credit there. Thor does look like he's sitting a little higher here, so either he's getting up out of his seat or you've got a perspective issue going on in that panel. But
Hold on, let me say
I think
something. Just a quick thing. So, do they have Waffle Houses in Australia?
they have waffle-like houses, yeah.
Okay, like pancake houses, like IHOP.
Yeah,
And
I would
all that kind
assume
of stuff.
so.
So when you have these booths, usually the tables are like, you could see how the table is overlapping the seat, and this is exactly how it looks. So you are like tucked in. You got to shimmy your butt to get into a booth like this to get where Thor is sitting. So if he's going to stand up like that, what he's actually going to do is knock the table over. And believe me, Thor can do that. Do you know what I mean? Thor can knock a Denny's table over or IHOP table, whatever. But they then won't be able to rest their elbows on it or something like that. So that's something that needs to be addressed there. Yeah.
Yeah, and just real quick, let me give you some ideas as to how you can mix those panels up. Do a few really loose sketches first. See what you can come up with other than your initial, assumption of what that panel should be. And, really push yourself, challenge yourself to make the next shot different from the previous one in, not a minor way, but a significant way, a more interesting way.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next page. Quethum. I like it. But
Yeah, me too.
give me a sign on top of the Waffle House to let me know that it is indeed the Waffle
I
House.
think that's a waffle there.
It could be a waffle,
I see
but
this
that's the
little-
problem, is it could be,
Yeah.
but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
So make it as obvious as you possibly can.
Hmm.
And then we've got the bottom panel where the villains are in the foreground. They're big, but they're facing away from us. And if this is the first time that we're being introduced to them, it's hard to tell exactly. It's hard to interpret who they are
Hmm.
supposed to be. And because this is the introductory panel of the villains, we want to know that, that this is where they step onto the stage for us.
Yep.
So what I would do is I would turn them around so that they are more recognizable. And as for the heroes, place them maybe in the foreground. They don't need to have a full body shot though. As long as we've got a few visual cues there, Thor's hammer,
Hmm.
Hercules, whatever he wields,
Some mallet.
have those in the foreground, but make sure that the attention is placed on those villains. And
Yeah.
this is a critique, obviously, that I've given to. You're probably sick of hearing it at this point if you're watching the whole critique video.
Totally.
That it's, as you can see, it's a common problem that comes up for a lot of people. Comes up a lot for me sometimes
I'll also say I
as
feel
well.
like these characters are more rendered, as in there's shading and details added to them than the people in our foreground here. So why are we choosing to do that, right?
And also, are those villains just placed? Like, are they on lower ground there?
I
Because
don't know.
if we're supposed to be looking down on this scene,
Hmm. I think we
then
are.
we need to be placing those characters into it so that it appears as though we're not looking straight at them at eye level, which is what it appears as now, but
Yeah,
we're
these
looking
are eye
above
level,
them. They're eye level, and
but these we're looking down at
yeah,
slightly.
slightly.
Slightly. Yeah.
So just again, perspective issues. Work on your perspective.
Yeah.
Placing. We got a tutorial on how to draw comics.net, a number of them that cover perspective in great depth.
Totally.
So highly
Yeah.
recommend you
Tutorials and
check it
courses
out.
on it
It's all
because
free,
everybody avoids
except for the
it, but it
courses.
needs to happen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just one comment on this first page. Love the faces. They're very Disney-esque and stuff like that. Some of the anatomy needs a little bit of work, though. There's some wobbly bits and stuff going on here that aren't working and stuff. But the faces are like very, very cool, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Ashikur Sarkar is up next.
All right, Ashika Sakura. Very nice work on this panel. You've got your own style going on. Cool establishing shot. We can see the characters. Probably leave a little bit more room in the panel just to show where we are, so that I know it's the waffle place. We're looking. It seems like we're looking from the outside in. Like it looks like we're standing outside the waffle place. We're looking through the window because of that window separator there.
Yeah,
That one there.
that's what
So
it looks like.
it's strange. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be in the diner or I'm supposed to be outside of it. Something to make sure is a little bit more obvious next time. And even if we are outside of it, it's still not quite working. You want to pull the camera back a little bit. Maybe we're looking at them through the window from a distance, but
Yep.
still in a way where we can obviously see those characters. Okay, the conversation's unfolding. I like the amount of emotion coming out of the characters. That's all good. Not entirely sure what's happening in the second bottom panel. I think that they're about to arm wrestle, but those characters are in silhouette. It's a little hard for me to tell exactly what's supposed to be
They almost look
unfolding
demonic
there.
because of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't think it's helping.
I think this is a part of your style, quite possibly, but something to think about. You want to make things as clear as possible for the reader when it comes to sequential storytelling. Love that bottom panel. It's cool to see Thor almost jumping out of his seat. He's celebrating the the match.
Totally.
Let's go to the next page.
Just a quick thing. Interesting crop, right? Like, why would we cut her face like that and stuff?
True.
Right? Yeah.
True.
Some of these choices are not helping too much.
All right. The explosion could certainly be a little bit more interesting. It's kind of just because we're looking at it also from a distance, like it's not really right in our face. It feels like a little insignificant explosion. Besides that, want to be able to tell that it's the waffle place exploding, so add a detail in there to tell us that visually. And then in the surrounding area, we've got a few little shoe boxes, right? Nothing to tell us what the scale of the scene is. There's no cars, there's no people
Mhm.
outside of the exploding waffle place, and so this could either be very small or very big. It's really hard to tell, even what we're necessarily looking at. It could be a microchip board, for all we
Totally.
know, right? There's just not enough detail there to
Yeah.
tell us. So add more visual clues in there. Some stoplights, some cars, like I said, some
Mhm.
other buildings that actually we can tell what the building is meant for.
Well, I'm going to
And
jump in and just kind of say Google Maps is your friend,
true.
right? Like
Mm,
Google Map this and just say small town America or Waffle
mm,
House, in Hicksville, USA or something on Main
that's a good
Street,
point.
right? And just Google Maps lets you pan the camera slightly. You can move it up a little bit and you can kind of look and then you say, okay, that's what
Mm,
a street would look like. That's what this would look like. I've done it for like things like Times Square and everything, right? Like do that and then work off of that, right? Like it's that we've got so many references at our disposal at the click of a few buttons. There's no reason why you shouldn't be using references here.
yeah. We often hear about accidentally over detailing, but
Hmm.
there's also something to be said about under detailing, not
Yeah,
having enough information there.
yeah.
All right. And then we've got the bottom panel. I mean, we've said that it's on previous pages, so I don't really need to say a whole lot on it at this point, but I'll just point out that those villains are looking very small, very insignificant. This is their grand entrance. We got to make sure that the attention is all on them, and they're all the way back there in the background. We could
Hmm.
so easily miss them. For the characters, the heroes who we've already been introduced to, their backs are to us, and yet they're taking up the most amount of space in that panel. So we've got to fix that. We've got to rearrange this composition with a few different sketches, a few different options that we
Hmm.
could go with, and
Hmm.
make sure that we pick the best one.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Next one is Andy Liu.
Andy Liu, nice.
Yeah.
We know Andy and his work.
Andy submitted tons of times. Let's see if there's anything pushing me from one panel to the next. I'm kind of looking and I'm not really seeing it. In fact, I come down on this side and there's some confusion. Do I come here, here, here? Or do I come here, here, here? This type of paneling with the two and then the one leads to some confusion. Okay. So especially because in this they're not like a repeating panel or something. We've got camera switches and everything like that, right? So be very careful of that kind of stuff, okay, Andy?
Hmm.
It's this can lead to some confusion, okay? So either do something here that leads you either down to here or over to here, wherever you want to direct the eye, right? It's important because you're there. I can see a lot of improvement here in your work and everything, but I think that next step of dragging the viewer from one panel to the next, I think should be a concerted effort on your part. The coloring is way better than what you've submitted before. Two things that I really love is this worm's eye, table's eye view of the scene. I think it's very cool. Here I'm looking at it from the kind of below, under, just slightly lower than the tabletop and up, and here is almost the same thing. It's just I'm just looking a little bit below the table, right? I appreciate that. I appreciate the camera angles and stuff. Anything else I want to point out? Anatomy is really cool. I've always enjoyed Andy's anatomy. I think he
Hmm.
punches really well and stuff. um Usually I don't like cropping of faces like this, but the fact that he's laughing and ha ha ha, that's the emphasis there, right? So I'm
Hmm.
I'm okay with that. I'll let something like that slide. Number
Yeah.
two, what do we got here? Oh well, we've got a cool little explosion. I could see that this shop is blowing up. This street looks extremely gloomy though. I don't know, like hold on. I can't really see anything out there, so I don't know if this is nighttime. Maybe it is gloomy. It just kind of looks like a street out of Gotham or something. It's not like
Hmm.
a friendly neighborhood where a pancake house might be. This is a no-name place with pet shops and porn shops or something. Like it's not a friendly neighborhood at all.
Yeah.
Spider-Man did not hang out here, right?
Uh,
A couple little things that I notice is like, okay, here's some. perspective, right? But then the pet shop name does not follow that perspective. In fact, a lot of this is like the perspective is not being really tight or anything. Okay. I think it can be tightened up a little bit. I like the explosion here. I like the design of the explosion booming out, but oh, here's the diner sign. Okay. So there is something there that shows it's the diner, right? And then we've got our characters in here. I think overall, Andy's improved in his coloring a lot. He's, the only time I'm seeing this blacked out airbrush is in this one to try to punch these guys into the foreground. I don't know if it's really working here, and I don't know if this wispy airbrushing of smoke is really working here and stuff. I'm not really sure, but I like this fact that I have a feeling if we saw the line art here, you'd see that he halos this foreground characters. You can see the haloing on them. Right?
Yeah.
And so this is a coloring choice of why how much they're going to stand forward compared to that. I might have silhouetted all of these guys. I might have just blacked them all out, depending. Like I might have started with that and just seen, okay, do I like this or not, right? Overall, I like the horde and everything like that. A quick little thing before you jump in, Clayton. One thing I love is the stretched shadow. That is an effect that not many people would catch, and Andy did it. So it makes me very, very happy. The stretching of the shadows here and stuff, right? It's very cool.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just say one thing because we brought it up previously, and this is a good example of it again. Tangents. The villain, the tallest villain in the bottom panel, has a tangent right on top of his head against the panel.
Right there. Almost exactly. Like he is exactly on the line, right? Like, why? Choose below, choose above, but don't choose on that line.
Yep. Just something to look out for. And even professionals can overlook this stuff sometimes accidentally. So now you can keep it in mind for next time. And I just want to also say that I love the placement of those characters on Andy's page.
Totally. Me too. Perfect. Me too. Yep. Next one is Andrija Dresniak.
All right, Andrija. Great work on this. Hey, I love your drawing skills. You've got great anatomy on those characters, and I especially love the facial expressions of them. I think that you're getting across the correct emotions, the emotional context of the situation. Holds solid for us, the reader. Awesome. It all checks out. Hard to make a situation like this look interesting as sequential art, but I think that you've done a fairly good job of it. And one of the ways in which you have done so is, you've tried to mess around with the camera positioning. So in some panels, you've got it set from a distance. Other panels, you've got it placed above. And I think that works really well for the most part. You have got 4 shots where we're looking at the characters directly from the side. That's probably a little bit too many. So again, add that additional variation in there and you'll increase the interest of your page even more. Let's jump to the next page. All right, we've got the explosion again. This is a really little explosion. And it just feels insignificant when you pulled the camera out that much and it's that small. It's kind of like if you watch a movie where there's an airstrike and you're looking through the crosshairs of the area that they're about to strike, and they drop the bomb and it's like this little explosion from a distance when you're way up into the sky. That's probably what you're imagining, but as an illustration, it looks like an explosion in an ant's world. So
I gotta say, it looks like the dishwasher was overflowing. Like it looks bubbly. It doesn't look like an explosion. The only thing that tells me an explosion is the cool fonting, right? Like the boom. But those look like soft, like cotton candy bubbles coming out of there.
Yeah, pros are that you got the waffle sign out the front of it. That's good. We can tell it's a Waffle House. Place some other items. Dress that set a little bit more so that we know where the waffle place is situated. Totally. Is it in town? Is it rural? Is it, where is it?
Yep. New York.
And
where is it?
Exactly. People like it when they see their hometown in a comic book.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
That was a big thing about Marvel. They always set their set their stories in real world locations, which made it feel really relatable.
And that's why I was always a Marvel guy instead of DC. DC, I couldn't
There you
relate to
go.
Gotham or anything like that. But I remember like the X-Men, maybe number 195 or somewhere early around there. They went to Calgary. And I was like, that's my town. Like it was insane that you could see the
Mm.
Calgary Stampede sign and stuff like that. It was so awesome. So as said before, Google Maps use real world references and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Mm. You done an interesting thing in that bottom panel with the villains and the hero. It
Mhm.
almost heroes. It almost looks like a Renaissance painting,
Totally. Totally.
right? And hey, I think that's cool. It's actually something that we haven't seen a lot of in the other entrants. So,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, awesome job on that. I'd just like to see the lady villain. Is she supposed to be there? I like to see
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And I would actually give the villains a little bit more space. I'd bring them in maybe closer, or pull the characters out further, so there is that little bit extra sense of symmetry, since that's the kind of uh, composition that you're trying to go for here, with the heroes on one side and the villains on the other.
Right. I think the framing like this, maybe a tightening up with the heroes on this side and then the villains pushing in layers this way or something could really
Yeah.
work here, right? Yeah.
I like that you got the
Um,
villains coming out the heroes coming out the rubble too. It really looks like
too.
that they were a
Yeah.
part of that explosion, and we know that now thanks to the way in which you've drawn
Totally
it.
agree with that. You know what I love? I just wanted to point some out that I noticed and stuff, right? Is that this first panel, they did do it from outside the diner because you could see the shrubbery and all that kind of stuff. And I like that. This is a panel looking into the diner,
Mm,
and Hercules is giving us a little smirk as he looks out of the diner. I think it's cool. I think it's a cool page, cool job. I might have done some little bit tighter cropping on some of this, like maybe this could have been the panel here or
yeah.
something, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's some excess stuff here that it looks like these guys are really far apart and on a different level than this. And a
Mm,
little bit of chopping could have cleaned that up a little bit, right?
for sure.
Okay, next one is a double page spread. The artist was nice enough to put it on 2 pages for us. So let's see how
Mm.
this looks. What do you think? Oh, I'm up. Am I up?
Yeah, you're up
Yeah, I'm up.
next.
Okay, well, what do I got?
I can take
um,
it if you want.
I really hold on. Am I up? I can't remember. Doesn't
You're
matter.
up.
I'm up. Okay, so first panel establishing shot. We've got the town. It looks like kind of a town center behind us, which I love, and it's barely there and stuff like that. They're sitting in a booth. It's all good. They're relaxed. They're having fun. A little bit of smirking. Conversations going on. I'm gonna try to get past some of these word bubbles because they're not done especially well, right? So it goes, from here brings me down to here, brings me over to here, brings me down to here, I guess, because of this overlap here with Hercules' head. Then it brings me over here, brings me down to here. I don't think it's got great panel flow, and the truth is, these word bubbles make it even more confusing. Like I'm kind of getting pushed all over the place here, and like I'm supposed to go from ha 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 down to here. No, I'm supposed to come over here, right? Like,
Mm,
where's the direction, right? Like,
mm,
um, when you're plotting something like this out and you're plotting it with word, like we've got a dialogue in the script, right? So we left it up to the artist whether they wanted to put the dialogue in. We said leave room for it, but if you want to, put it in, right? But if you're going to put it in, you're going to put it in with a conscious choice, right? You're going to put it in and say, okay, well, this goes here because I want it. So if I'm following this dialogue, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, that doesn't look like the smoothest process there. Something
no,
seems wrong, right? This does not look like
it's hard to read.
it's hard to read. The dialogue made it harder to read. Okay. The artwork, I've actually seen this entry without dialogue on it, and I preferred it. Right. But I wanted to show this here because this is a lesson for all. If you're going to add the dialogue and the bubbles and all this kind of stuff, the word balloons and all this kind of stuff, right? Then you're doing it as a conscious choice. Everything when you're designing a panel, designing a page, designing the flow of it all is choices, right? You don't just haphazardly throw it all down and just hope that the puzzle worked out the way you wanted it to, right? What you're doing is choosing where you're going to put this. So how should you be choosing? Well, we know it should be easier to read. Just as we've
Mm.
talked about panel flow and directing the eye with hints within the panel and all that, we do the same thing with dialogue. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's my critique on this particular page. I love the hatching style. This is my kind of artwork. Like, I really enjoy this. I enjoy the big bada boom, the big boom and the explosion and all that. And
Yeah, it's great.
the
Perfect.
last panel, I think, could have emphasized a little bit of the baddies a little bit more. But other than that, this is a great, great entry. One of my favorite entries. And so I'm not going to critique the art because, there's a lot of great things that I love about it and stuff, especially for some reason. I'm in love with this panel of Hercules. But it reminds me of like straight out of the early 90s or something, right?
Mm.
But I will say that this artist is great. Who is it again? Alfred Lauzon, right?
Mm.
But their weak point was how they chose this the word balloons and the ordering of it and stuff like that. And it really, this entry with this, and we got both entries, right? But this here is a lesson learned that when you make the choice to add it, you're making the choice strategically and add it smart.
Yep. And one thing that I do when I'm doing my own layouts for a comic book page is I actually include the speech bubbles in there. And
Lovely.
even if it's not the final dialogue,
Mhm.
I'll write down the dialogue that I'm intending to have in there, roughly how big it needs to be and how much room I need
Yep.
to consider for
Yeah,
that
I,
speech
I gotta
bubble.
say, I've got the script sitting beside me when I'm doing a project. I usually have it pinned off to the side. I've got little memo notes all over my workstation here, and so I've got the script, and so I could see that it's okay. This one's going to be two paragraphs, or this one's going to be an exclamation point, one word, and then a paragraph that follows. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, well, here's an exclamation point, and I'll just kind of say, okay, well, here that is. Now, where might this fit on this panel? Oh, no, no, no. Okay, well, like, does this work for what I'm doing here or something like I might move it around a little bit, right? And so again, the main point is be strategic. Alfred,
Totally.
amazing artist, but be strategic in these choices, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and now our last one. He was late, so we've disqualified him for a number of reasons, mostly because he's one of the judges and because he's won 3 years in a row or something like that. So he submitted under a alias. This is Richter Wufino, not to be confused with Victor, of course, right? What do you think of this?
Yeah, Richter Rufino. Obviously, absolutely amazing, amazing work. I mean,
Yeah.
that top establishing shot is just exactly what it needs to be. We can
Totally.
tell without a doubt that they're sitting in a waffle place. We've got the pancakes or the waffles coming over, the ice cream dripping down over them.
Mhm.
And then I love that you can see, is it the counter in the background? It looks like the place in which you order, or maybe another place that people sit at.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but there's just so many details in here, and it just brings the whole place to life. So, think about it. You got an empty room to fill here when it comes to laying out your establishing shot, your interior or your exterior. What are you going to add in there to really make it look interesting? Tell the viewer where it is they're supposed to be, imagining the characters as being, and yeah, adding in the details. Those little details will just make it look so much more interesting. And then
If
you've got so much, and then you've got so much expression happening as well
Mhm.
within the characters themselves as they're talking to one another. Like I said in previous entries, this is a very default boring situation. People just chatting
Mhm.
around a table at a diner, and Richter has done just an incredible job at increasing the level of interest there. Like, this is fun to read, regardless of that.
Totally.
Now it's a fun situation that you're engaged with, that you're investing in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and of course, we got that second panel there where it's just Hercules' head, right?
Love
We
it.
don't need the characters in, we don't need the other characters in there. We got a nice big shot of him.
And pointing us to the next one.
It's exactly what I was talking about before. He has done it right.
Now,
So be taking notes.
one small critique here. Here's the edge of the table, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And we've got Jane Foster and Hercules sitting on that side of the table, right? And then Thor is sitting beside her, right? Stays consistent. Thor is beside her. Jane Foster, edge of the table. Hercules, Jane, right? And Thor might be here. Again, consistent, edge of the table. Hercules, Jane, Thor beside her. Why did this switch? She's putting down her helmet here. She's about to put it down. Oh no, hold on. Yeah,
It hasn't
how did
switched.
Thor get out here? That's
Wait,
what
what?
my problem was. How did Thor all of a sudden jump out here?
Ah,
She's putting it down her helmet, and then all of a sudden Thor's on this side. That's what was bothering me. It wasn't that it switched, is that all of a sudden Thor came on the outside of the table.
that's a good observation.
A little bit of a leap there. Because what I actually thought was
Ah,
they spun the table. Like, I thought this was looking at the table, right? Because Thor's position is on this side of the table, right? So I thought, okay, well, the camera spun and then he messed up the placement of these characters. No, no, no. The placement of the characters is fine. She's on the right, he's on the left. It stayed consistent throughout. How did Thor do that jump? That's my problem then. I thought it was a camera spin problem or something like that, but really it's how she's putting her helmet down and then all of a sudden Thor's on the outside. A little bit
yeah, it
strange.
could be. Maybe like Thor got out of his seat and he was excited. He was running around the place and
I
throwing
don't
his
know, but
hands up in the air.
this is hitting the beats. It's beat, 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 and all of a sudden 30 seconds pass for Thor to get out or something. Like it's a little strange, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then we'll take a look at page 2.
yeah. I mean, page two. Just I couldn't have thought of a better final shot
Mhm.
myself. I mean, he's got this crazy like curved perspective happening
Mhm.
that allows us to be able to see a really beautiful representation of the villains and also at the same time get a good look at the heroes as well. And we're not looking at either one of them from behind. We get a good representation of both. And
Mhm.
I just think, in terms of really sitting down and thinking about, okay, what's the best shot that I could possibly come up with here? You can tell that he's deeply considered it. He might have even done what we were talking about, what we were
Totally.
suggesting, which is come up with a number of different thumbnail sketches and
Mhm.
pick the best option from that. And of course, the boom is awesome. I love how the lettering is placed above it, and you really get this feeling that it's exploding, and it feels big, even though we're zoomed out, and it's actually small. Looking at it from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome
I
job.
really appreciate also this, staggered panel border and stuff like that. He's playing with it to add impact of effect and stuff, right? The power that's coming in, channeling into the Waffle House, the International House of Waffles, the signage tells us what's going on. Like, look at the composition I've got here, how I'm showing here's the crest of heroes and then the layers of evil that are coming at them and stuff like that. This is an exceptionally well thought out page, right? I'm sure if given a little bit more time, maybe he would render things a little bit more or something like that. But no, who was this again? Richter Wolfino. Yeah, he definitely he banged it out here, and there's a reason why this particular person is disqualified. He's won too many times, and he's doing really well for himself.
Yeah, for sure. Great job, Rick. I mean, this is an awesome example of a sequence done right. So, again, I hope everyone's taking notes on this one
Yeah,
because it's
absolutely,
incredible. Yeah,
absolutely.
not a single boring shot in
No,
this.
no, love it.
Which, you know, if you can say that about your page, then you know that you've done a great job.
Yeah, totally. So, guys, this pretty much wraps it up. We are announcing the winners, as in the rankings from first and so on and stuff like that. But really, in my opinion, that's not the important part. What was important was getting this type of feedback on your art. So whether you submitted it through some of our learning channels, through myself, Clayton, as instructors or something like that, through our Facebook group, through email, whatever it was, through YouTube, right? Doesn't really matter. We're just happy to give you guys feedback on this. Like I said, originally we recorded with the guys from Comic Cast. Special thanks to Joe again for writing the script. We recorded with the other judges, Death, Mike, Rick, and Victor. Richter. And but it ended up being me and Clayton making sure that even though we had technical difficulties, that we were bringing a nice package review back to you guys because you did a lot of work. So we wanted to make sure we did some extra work for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really big thanks to everybody involved. Huge thanks to Ed, who pretty much invented the SummerSlam. Of course, wouldn't be here without him. Huge thank you to Comics Cast, who just really committed to the SummerSlam this year. Sponsored the us, donated for the prizes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing to have them on board and to be collaborating with them in this way. It's an honor. And then to the judges, all the wonderful names that were mentioned by Ed there. You guys really helped us to bring this together, and we hope that you, the audience, enjoy, and the people who submitted their entries get a lot out of the feedback that we've given today. Always remember to take it not as something that you should be discouraged by, but something that you should use to help build upon your current skill set. Because look, you get nothing out of compliments. We could have sat here and complimented your work easy the entire time, but it wouldn't have helped one bit. It just would have made you feel good. But you want to get better, right? That should be at the top of your list of priorities.
So getting better, I want you to use the feedback that we've given here. We've also got a lot of free tutorials and courses. You'll see them posted in our free Facebook group, right? How to Draw Comics. The tutorials are, sometimes easy to read, easy to follow and stuff. The courses, they get a little bit more in depth. We've got everything from drawing figures, drawing faces, anatomy, even an entire course on how to make comics, like composition, panel flow, all these types of things, right? So basically, hang out with us, and we've got it all, and we're bringing it all to you.
Yeah, heck yeah. That was my intention with howtodrawcomics.net. Make it the #1 learning resource for aspiring comic book artists around the world. That is really what it's become. I mean, like, we are ranking. I was checking it out the other day, Ed. We're ranking #1 for many of the search terms related to learning how to draw comic books. So
there we go.
It's not hard to find us, but yeah, if you'd like more tips, tricks, and tutorials, and you want to delve deeper into increasing your abilities and what you need in order to do that, then highly recommend that you check out howtodrawcomics.net.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for everything, guys. Thanks for the submissions, the judges, Clayton for helping me put this together and everything. And thanks for you guys watching. We'll see you next time.
Oh yeah, until next time, keep drawing, keep practicing. Bye-bye.